folks, I'm going to be out of place here on so many levels that it's in there thinking about. Okay, now, I'm going to try something today for the first and quite possibly the last time, which is I'm going to bring something from my psychiatric clinic into the stand-up set, okay? Now, by and large, it's quite worrying when you hear that somebody has a psychiatric clinic, because it's not usually a casual acquisition. Unless you happen to be a psychiatrist, which I am, fortunately. So that's okay, it's a more commonplace and manageable sort of horror. What I want to tell you about today is actually my one frustration from working in the psychiatric clinic. And to do that, I'm going to have to introduce you to Mrs. Allenby, who's one of my long-term patients. Okay? Mrs. Allenby has a very severe bipolar disorder. Most of her 20s were disrupted with a series of depressive and manic episodes. But over the last 8 years, she's really managed to turn her life around. She's got very good control over her illness because she's an excellent person at managing her own illness. Okay? Now, that's vital information that you need because we'll need some context to go ahead. I'm also hoping that her story at the end of it all will at least make you like, well, the set was about as funny as a root canal, but I think I learned something. Okay, now my frustration about the clinic is this, and that is actually the lack of understanding of macroeconomic policy and the long-term national financial plan that seems to permeate my entire clinic. Okay? And that is extremely frustrating because, these are very simple issues, but in 5 to 10 minutes, it's a bit tricky to explain them to people, as no doubt most of you already discovered. So, here's what happened at my last consultation with Mrs. Allen. So she came and said, Dr. Z, most people call me Dr. Z, because it's a lot easier than my actual surname. It also means that I can usually sign prescriptions like so. Don't click, that's not terribly professional, so you've got to go. Listen, Dr. Z, I'm doing fine in terms of my bipolar. I think nothing's really changed the last time I saw you. But the one thing that's really worrying is that I've got this letter from the DWP and I'm having my benefits reviewed. And I've got to go and see somebody there, and they've told me already in the letter that it's likely that my money's going to be cut down and I'm going to have another assessment about my medical fitness to work. And this is really stressing me out. I've tried very hard to work more, but I can't really manage it with my illness. It's about as much as I can do. Do you think you could write a letter to help just support my application? And I said, well, Mrs. Allenby, I'd be very happy to do that. But before I do that for you, I want you to just think about what you're asking me to do and just consider the benefits, and no pun intended. Just consider the benefits and risks of what you're asking me to do. And she said, do I really have to do that? I can't see what the issue is over here. Well, think about it. If you get your money back, somebody else is going to have to pay the price for that, right? And you do want to consider that when you make your decision. And she said, do you mean somebody who's worse off than I am? Somebody who's got a more severe illness? And I said, well, that's a good thought. It hadn't occurred to me. I was thinking about non-doms, actually. And corporations. Corporations are people too. I'm thinking that actually some people are corporations. It's supposed to be very good for taxation. And she said, hang on a minute, are you saying that non-doms and corporations are paying for my benefits? And I said, no, that's not it at all. But they might have to. And that's quite a risky matter to get into. And it's very important that we all think about the bigger picture. Okay. The big picture of our future and the gaping hole in the middle, the deficit. And she was quite angry, quite surprisingly. And she said, I don't get it. Do we have to think about this? And so, of course, we're all in this together. We do have to think about this. I said, well, I don't agree with that. My family struggles. We get about £150 a month, family of 4, and we're barely able to make ends meet. We've got about £30 to spend on food most weeks. I said, well, I sympathize. Gwyneth Paltrow couldn't manage it on $29 a week. And she's somebody who's managed to consciously uncouple nutrition from food. So I appreciate your struggle, but just remind me, Mrs. Allenby, what does your husband do? He said, well, you know, he still hasn't recovered from his back injury, so he can't work. I said, aha, right, okay. I think I see what the problem is here. It's a bit hard to describe you as a hard-working family. So a lot of what's planned for the country doesn't really apply to you. I don't think anybody's talking about you at this time. And she said, that's absolutely outrageous. I can't believe that the government isn't thinking about its most needy and vulnerable citizens. Surely they must care about them. Now, I have heard a lot of very bizarre things lately. A lot of very bizarre. And it's important to know at those times to keep a straight face. But by God, this was hard. The government cares about its needy and most vulnerable citizens. I managed to keep a straight face and say, well, okay, I mean, that's an interesting opinion, Mrs. Allenby. But, you know, I don't think it particularly helps your case very much. And she said, you know, Dr. Z, I'm extremely disappointed in you. Okay, I came here hoping for your help, but instead you seem to be one of the establishment. You're sort of telling me that somehow I'm supposed to look after the top 1%. And because if I don't, they're going to leave. And I bet that's what you're going to say next. And I said, well, you know, you're right. Because if the top 1% leave, it'll be very hard to manage with just 99%. The numbers will never add up. But tell me, Mrs. Allenby, have you heard of the trickle-down effect? And she said, well, my irritable bladder is a lot better. Thank you very much for asking. Mrs. Allenby, I do believe you extracted the urine there. What I was referring to was the trickle-down effect in economics. Have you heard of that? And she said, no. Have you ever experienced it? Well, I don't think so. And it's always very puzzling. Nobody I've spoken to has ever experienced the trickle-down effect. I said the trickle-down effect works like this, which is that you put all your money at the top of the economy, and then it trickles down to everybody at the bottom, and it works out well for everyone. She said, does that really work? Are we supposed to have seen that happen? I said, well, it can take some time, really. But I think we're quite hopeful that by the turn of the century, it'll be plainly evident to us that it has worked. Now, I've been able to tell you all this about Mrs. Allenby because she's given me her permission to tell you this. Partly because she thought this would be quite an interesting thing to tell people about. Pity her. But largely because she is completely and totally fictional. I just want you to bear that in mind in case you walk away thinking that I've breached confidentiality in public. Anyway, to get back to the end of what happened there, see, obviously, this is not anything unusual, so she said, look, I don't really care what's happening. Can you just write this letter for me, and I just hope that I'll get my money. And as she walked out of the room, she just turned to me and said, Dr. Z, do you think there's any chance that all this stuff about benefit reform is just some sort of big, terrible joke? And I said, I think it's very unlikely. Politicians tend to take jokes very seriously. It's in fact the only way to ensure mutual respect in their profession. See you in 2 months. There ended the consultation.